So now this is literally the panel between you and lunch. But I will make sure we whip up some nice excitement, some good appetizing thoughts, some interesting ideas, possibly debates. And I'm thrilled to have a very erudite and accomplished set of panelists to work with and through. But I'll make some opening comments. And, this issue of HR, whether it's branding, this issue of looking for talent, what really is talent? Is talent a static definition by itself when you are at a certain scale and size as an SME, as an entrepreneur? The talent that you have, would it necessarily scale up and be relevant when you become a company which is bigger? Should you be looking at talent ahead of your times? What does it take to attract that talent? The culture, the recognition, the appreciation, your own role. How do you role model? And how do you therefore handhold the culture that you want your enterprise to be? And finally, this entire issue of how do you prepare an organization that will not only grow, but will remain relevant. Now, as someone who's been a CHRO now for many years across various large companies, I must admit, the problem is no different whether you're small or large. HR and organizational issues are possibly the most critical, the most sensitive agenda for any organization. When you are starting off, when you're growing, when you've matured and you want to reinvent, when you want to double yourself even when you're in a scale and size that you are, it is complex. And it is complex not only because entrepreneurs, boards, chairmen, CEOs, panelists have a point of view. From the doorman to the chairman, everyone has a point of view on HR. And everyone believes that they are right. Are they? I don't know. Also, would entrepreneurs become their biggest enemies? Would their past success possibly constrain their willingness to change? And a lot of enterprise scale-up is really around transformation and change. And Sunit, I'm going to pick your thoughts on that. So we are going to use this time to try and put various things in perspective as quickly as we can. So it will be more rapid fire. It will be more a chat show. And I will possibly in some time take some comments and questions from you and again possibly get back to the conversation in the time that we have. And by, I think, about 2 o'clock or so, we'll try and wrap up. So with that, I think the most important perspective that I want to invite is really the entrepreneur's perspective, the entrepreneur's dilemma, the employer's dilemma. What really keeps an entrepreneur awake when it comes to talent? What are the hopes that you have from talent? What do you struggle with? So maybe, Lavanya, maybe you can give us an opening perspective of what do you really see as issues and challenges, and what answers would you be typically prioritizing for?
So I think can you all hear me? Okay. So I think what I'll probably do is talk a little bit about maybe Nalli's philosophy to its talent and how we sort of think about it. So as you know, we're a family-run business. We've been in the business for 90 years. And it started with a flagship store in 1928, which is still now in Chennai. And if you look at the average tenure of a salesperson there, it's 8 years. That's average, which means that half of those people have actually spent more than that. Now, we know what the attrition is for frontline employees. We know what the attrition is for salespeople. So to achieve that is really something of an anomaly. And the way that I suppose we do it is, it's less about core values and you put it up on the walls or anything, but it's more about if I catch any 3 people in my organization from frontline, mid-level, senior management, whoever it is, and I ask them, what does this company stand for? What are your top 3 priorities? What are their top 3 priorities? Will you hear consistency in their responses? And I think if as an organization, as an entrepreneur, or as business people, we're able to do that, then that is what really builds that culture. And then do they really act on those core values? So one of the things that we've considered our core value is, as a family business, we think of the employees also as members of the family. And if you think about it, when a customer walks into a retail establishment such as ours, The first person they're going to see is the salesperson, and the last person they're going to see is the salesperson. They're not going to come up to management and talk to you, or whoever is the head of merchandising or whoever is the head of strategy or anybody who's sitting somewhere else. So your frontline really is the face of the organization, and you've got to treat them as such. And so what we've done is we've actually quite empowered them. All of our, and it's a bunch of different things, of course, not just the training programs. So what we do is much more of an apprentice model. It's less about, we do give them training programs, and they've got their manuals and all of that. But what they have is also a very strong induction program. They come in as a salesperson, and then they sort of shadow a senior person. They're sort of apprentice through that model. And we very rarely do lateral hires at mid-level positions. It's typically people from within the organization who rise through the ranks. The incentive structure and all of that is also set up almost by design to be a little Darwinian, so that your best salespeople are the ones that you want to retain. And the folks who really are not that strong, even after the guidance and the apprenticeship and everything that you've given them, automatically they will drop out of the system because they feel that they have better prospects elsewhere. Because here with their variable pay and the way that the incentives are structured, they really are not able to measure up. And so it's, if you look at it, a lot of people say, no, what I want is talent to stay. And that's the big pain point, and that's, we just don't find talent, and when they come in, they don't have that ownership mindset. But I think some of the onus is also on the entrepreneur, right? How do you train up your talent? How do you give them that visibility? How do you, of their career trajectory, their career growth? How do you create those opportunities and also give them not just that security, but that push and that ambition to say, if I do feel that I'm a strong performer and I vie for more than just a sales job, I can see that there has been that track record in the organization and they're going to stand behind me.
Brilliant. I think you've touched on many chords, but I'm going to pick on the start. And maybe, Nicolas, I'll look at you. Why do you think, and how do you think would a mid-size enterprise appeal to talent across a diaspora? Do you think that's where they want to go? Or do they want to go to something that they think is bigger and better? And what would your advice be to entrepreneurs for this?
So I'm in the business of recruitment. So we recruit people from 25, 30 lakhs upwards. And every time when we speak to candidates, in most cases, they speak about, I want to join an MNC. Yeah, that's the first thing which we often see as the criteria for selection, whether people are already in an MNC or whether they are in a company in India. Yeah. Now, what we realize is that when people during their career, and most of us would have a career of 30 years, hopefully, is that the role becomes more and more important the longer people are in their career. In the beginning, it's all about the brand, MNC, and so on. So the aspiration changes over time, but it is still a big aspiration to be part for an MNC. Now, where you can make a difference is, and it's coming a little bit back to what I just heard about consistency, empowering. These are a lot of words which actually are very important for people when they join a company. And I feel I've seen companies, domestic Indian companies, and I'm talking mid-sized, where I see a promoter, if I can call him like that, being very open to empower. And I've seen a lot of successes of people integrating in these companies. But I've also seen the other thing. They say all the right things, but then when on the day the person joins, they don't empower. They want to keep control. They say, yeah, but the person first needs to prove themselves before I can give them that task. So there's a lot of resistance on really giving the people the opportunity to grow. I love the experience you have by growing people internally. I think that is very key. We do actually exactly the same in our company. And hiring lateral, although it's against my business, is not the only solution. I think you really need to work on your own talent pipeline and think how I can grow the company. Sometimes you need to hire laterally, That's done mainly when you want to make a shift in business. When you, for example, want to grow your e-commerce platform and you need certain skill sets, I can imagine you would need. But in cases where it's business as usual, try to grow that talent from within, because that's how you're going to retain them, and you're going to have people who are really engaged and want to invest in the company.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that perspective. And actually, it gets me to think of more questions. And I'm going to turn to you, Sunit. You've been a consultant for over 2 decades now.
Couple of decades, yeah.
Yeah. And you've had a huge diaspora of clients, MNCs and, mid-scale entrepreneurs. I just heard from Nicolas that at the end of it, a lot depends on the experience with the entrepreneur. Let go. You talked about it, Lavanya, also, that, the entrepreneur's responsibility of trying to keep talent, grow talent. So when you look at entrepreneurs and entrepreneur-driven companies and cultures, what do you think, Sunit, typically goes right? And what would your advice be for things which typically don't go right?
No, I think that's the thought that kind of got generated in my mind as well as I was hearing to both Lavanya and to Nicolas. With your permission, Prabir, can I ask for a show of hands in the audience? Sure. Okay, so simple question, and all of you run your businesses, and I understand varying sizes, very diverse industries. So the question is simple. How many of you believe that attracting, retaining, and developing your people is the #1 job that you have? Or how many of you believe that? Show of hands, please. Okay. So about 40%? Yeah. Okay. So that's great. I think 40% is good. I was expecting lower than that. So that emboldens me to essentially address your first question in terms of when does it go right. I think one of the misconceptions, and I'm going to be slightly provocative here, Prabir. One of the misconceptions or myths that I want to bust is the fact that we believe that, what works in large global scale companies, multinational, Indian, Indonesian, Chinese, does not work in smaller organizations. Correct. 100 people organizations, 500 people organizations, 1,000. Let's remember one thing. People, human beings, have the same needs. Whether they work in a large, huge conglomerate, which is global, or they work in a small startup, which is 10 people, or they work in a mid-sized company, which is maybe 500 people. And I think one of the important things to remember, and that's the reason I asked you the question, is, organizations become shadows of their leaders. So, while you all may want to call yourselves entrepreneurs, and you are entrepreneurs, absolutely. I mean, I'm someone who's, forget about running a business. I have an HR background, but unlike Prabir, I've never done HR in my life. I've only consulted. So I always have this small joke about myself. Those who can do and those who can't consult, right? They start giving advice. So the thing is that it boils down to you as leaders. I think and it also talks to the point that Lavanya made about experience, consistency. I think that's what gets right. So in the places, Prabir, where I worked over the last many years, and I remember one of my first clients when I started off my career was actually a sub-1,000 crore mid-sized business, family owned. And I think what I saw there was the fact that clearly there was this, and some of you, I'm very happy acknowledge that running the business is one thing, but I think making sure that we have the right people, we're treating them correctly, we are rewarding, recognizing them in the right manner, we are being fair and consistent, is the primary job of the leader of the organization. Now, you may have an HR person or even a function which takes care of the policies, the practices, and all of that, but the accountability rests with you. I think that's the first point. And I think that brings me to the other point of where does this lead us to, and the aspect of experience. And there's some sociology research that I'm quoting over here. It's what it says is that irrespective of how many people you have on your social media or how large an organization you work in, what you experience of an organization is a much smaller set. I mean, even for instance, I work in an organization that is almost 500,000 people globally. But if I were to tell you the people who are relevant to me in my experience as an employee in Accenture, I probably won't go beyond 50 or 60. Mm-hmm. The really important people who I would talk to, who talk to me, with whom I have a relationship. And the sociological research is that cultures typically change at about 150 people. Now, I don't know why it is. There's some research done on tribal societies that beyond 150, you start seeing shifts in culture. So the reason I say this is because even in some of your organizations, you're probably already at a scale where it may not be one uniform culture. But whatever your skill may be, it's very important for you to set an example and be very clear of what those behaviors, those practices are that embody your culture. And if there are people who are aligned to that culture, they'll stay with you. I think we heard from Lavanya about that. And the people who are not aligned to that, who potentially will find other options. So I think these are the two broad points I'll make. So, kind of wrapping it up, I think just to kind of talk about takeaway. Firstly, I think the one provocative takeaway is don't think just because of scale, some of the things that you read about, the Googles and the Amazons of the world don't work for you. That's one. And second is, it's your responsibility to set the right tone in terms of culture. And that's probably more important than any HR tool, system, or practice that you'll implement.
Excellent. Thank you, Sunit. So, I have always written, tweeted, and blogged about culture very closely, and I couldn't agree more with you. And the one suggestion I would have for many of you here is, there is nothing like discrete culture. There is nothing like a static culture. Culture evolves. And many a time, organizations, big and small, fall in this trap of looking for culture fit. I personally have never endorsed that. And particularly when you look in the times that we live in, which is turbulent and disruptive, we must be looking at culture plus, right? Because the more plural your organization is, the more diverse the perspectives, experiences, your culture is likely to get more genetic strength rather than having just one style. Apart from that, and you talked about this being 90 years old almost, Nalli, right? So when it started to where Nalli is today and its aspirations and the possibilities, culture, I'm sure, would need to change. And there's a difference between core values or moral values, but imperatives of business strategy. So what I want Lavanya to share with me is, because I think this is very important, how does the tone of culture change, especially as generations change, as leadership of entrepreneur-led organizations change? How easy is it to make those changes, and therefore would have signals to either your current employees or the kind of talent you may want to attract going forward?
So I think to answer your questions, there's a phrase, right? It's always been this way. And I think all of us have heard it at some point in our life to some question that we've asked somebody, and sometimes it can be frustrating to hear that. But it highlights the heart of what you spoke about. There's a difference between core values, values which truly are core, and things which is a way of doing business because we've done it this way for a certain period of time. That second one, which is not a core value, but more of we've just been on this track and we figured out how to do things a certain way, is the one that needs to get adapted as the environment changes, as the economy changes, there's more competition, there's disruption, there's all of that. But how do you know which is which? And it goes back, I think, to if you ask all of our employees, anybody, and you say, what do you stand for? What is this brand really? What makes you stand apart from anybody else? You'll most likely hear consistent answers. In my head, it's basically only three things, which is customer first, and you do everything and anything for the customer. It's not that transaction, that sale. If a customer comes in and she says, I'm looking for this particular sari and we don't have it, we've had cases where our salespeople have said, hang on, he's bought it from the store which is down the street and handed it to her. So he doesn't get that commission and he doesn't get that sale, but he's got a customer for life. Anytime she's going to, she's in need of a sari or she's in need of, of something, she's got an occasion where she needs to make a purchase, she's going to come back into that store to that salesperson and say, this man, because he's going to go above and beyond, he's not going to try and sell me what is there in his store. And that's the kind of thing that you can't put in your training manual. These are the kinds of stories that embody what you say. So when you say, I have a core value of customer first, what does that really mean? These are the stories that need to be celebrated and that need to be really, shown a light to. That's one. The other is we focus on the product at the heart of everything. There are certain times when we'll simply say, no, we refuse to do what the industry will do because that's our reputation, right? As a family business, like that's the name, and the name is everything that you have. And then the third is operational excellence, which comes from a culture of being frugal and passing along all of those savings to the customer, and it has a business benefit of it provides an entry barrier, right? Because if your margins are low, then it makes it really harder for someone else to come in because you're not bloated as a company. And so those will not change. Those are core values. But the things that will change is, sort of Nicolas pointed out, with e-commerce, we've had to actually hire laterally because those are not skill sets that we had internally. So we've had to, for the first time, we've had to bring in people from the outside. But when we bring in people from the outside, then we see, look, do they gel with our culture? And what I mean is things like this, the frugal mindset, the focus on operational excellence, having the focus and the ability to kind of prioritize. So even with our senior executives, I'll give an example. We don't have sort of limits. A lot of programs, like you'll have senior executives and you'll say, look, if you travel, then you have your allowance is so much, and then you're allowed to stay in this category of hotels, and so on and so forth, right? There's all kinds of perks and all kinds of benefits, and it comes with certain guardrails as well. We simply have none. And we've told them it's a trust-based company. It's a trust-based organization. We trust that you're not going to exploit the system. So there is no cap. You can stay in any place that you want. You can spend as much as you want, but it's based on trust. Because of that, what we've actually seen is that people, even when they come in from the outside, they recognize that they are given this level of autonomy, this level of empowerment, and they guard it, right? Now they control their reputation, they control how they are seen in the organization, and they actually very quickly adapt, and they recognize that this is the trust with which they brought me in, and so I am going to rise up to that, and I'm not going to disappoint. In fact, we've seen the opposite. The moment you put a cap on something, they'll always use everything right up to the cap. And so I think as entrepreneurs, we need to sort of reflect and see, are our own policies hindering, or are they actually helping when we talk about culture and culture fit and all of that?
Outstanding perspective. Thank you. This is brilliant. And no, I've had a similar experience in one of my earlier companies, which was one of the largest companies in India, but we actually did what you said. Even in a company that scale and size, trust people and they will act more responsibly. So I think very powerful comment.
And Prabir, may I add some point over there? I mean, even our own personal experience in Accenture, again, large global organization, very, very process driven, publicly listed. However, the one core value that we still probably hold the highest is what we call stewardship, which is that, whenever you take a decision, and this is in every year we do a refresher course in terms of our Accenture code of conduct and business ethics, is think about every decision as if it was your own business.
Absolutely.
This is not about you being an employee of Accenture. It's about this is your business, this is your firm, and you're a part of it. And this is irrespective of level.
Owner's mindset.
Absolutely.
How do you make that?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to continue with Sunit, and before I come for a question that's on my mind for Nicolas, but I heard Nicolas still talk about the reality of the Indian talent, where aspirationally it starts from the MNC and it starts going down, right? At least in the early years. I heard from Lavanya, at the end of the day, culture is important and fundamental tenets are non-negotiable, and you expect that. Now, you've been consulting clients in the region. What is your perspective and advice to entrepreneurs in the hall? This entire issue between tangible rewards and intangible rewards, right? I can only pay so much. I can't pay like a big company. Does that really make a difference? Vis-a-vis, if it does, is there a role for intangible rewards, recognition, appreciation, flowing from Lavanya's comment on culture? So what would your perspective and advice be to the people here in the room?
I think a great question, and I think this always comes up, not just small, medium-sized enterprise, but many organizations, because based on your economic model, your affordability, there is a certain price point for the talent that you can pay. I have one personal perspective on this, and second is some research that I'll quote. One is the fact that research, and let me talk about the research point first. I mean, more and more, and if you look at India's workforce, and I think I was doing some, I was looking it up, and I think we have about, the entire workforce is about 470 million, of which 65 or 70% is under the age of 35. Correct. Right? Now, obviously, how much of that workforce is employable in the kind of businesses you run, that's a separate point. Now, given all the research that exists in terms of that age bracket, one of the things that is coming more and more is, yes, there is an economic need, and there are those, there will be people who will have a propensity to job hop at for $500 more, or 1,000 rupees more. However, more and more the research shows, and this is not just India, this is global, and I've seen this in Indonesia, I've seen this in China, that when you looked at the things that people are looking for in the kind of work they want to do, in the kind of organizations they want to work for, they want to be inspired. They want to be part of a large something where they are making an impact to themselves and to communities around them. And actual pay was coming mostly number 4 or 5, Prabir. So I think that's something that one needs to look at. And it goes back to the point about the culture and values that we're talking about, because that's what you need to be able to tell a story to people you hire as well as to employees internally, in terms of what is it that you really stand for, and therefore how does that align with their purpose and what they're seeking for in their careers. My own personal perspective is, and again, having done some work in the past, even as a rewards consultant, Prabir, is that organizations, irrespective of size, industry, who do a good job of managing the intangibles. Now, intangibles would be, for instance, just the culture of rewarding and recognizing. Not always assuming that, look, good job, yeah, that's fine. Great job, okay. Even the fact that people are doing a good job, are you recognizing them? Are you recognizing the superlative performers? Are you also making sure that the people who may not be superlative but are your solid citizens, as it's called, they are not made to feel that, oh, they don't matter. So I think having that consistency, because, and again, as going back to the aspect of your responsibility as leaders, I think the issue of consistency and fairness is not just that you in your mind feel that your intent is fair, you need to be perceived as fair as well. Because whether you have 500 employees or 100 employees, each of them look at each of your decisions with that yardstick or with that lens. So I think that intangible reward, all these intangible rewards of whether it's just the fact that you may, for instance, there's a female employee who is returning from maternity. You give her flexibility, even though maybe it's not a part of your policy. But if you give one employee that flexibility, you need to be consistent and potentially do it for other cases also which are genuine. So, intangible, actions like that. So my own personal perspective, Prabir, sorry, taking a long time to come to the point, is that I saw that you can actually command a premium of 25 to 30% against your peer group if you were focused on this. And this was actually a client of mine with whom I worked. They were paying at the median of the market. So, for instance, if they was in a set, just to kind of explain that, in a set of 100 organizations, 50 organizations in that industry were paying more than them. But this organization, in terms of the kind of talent it was able to attract and retain, was probably at the 80th percentile in terms of its premium. And this was some work that we actually did and published. This was about almost a decade ago. My sense is, with the workforce growing younger in India, this probably holds even more true. So my view, I'm absolutely always for intangible rewards. I mean, and I try to practice what I preach. I mean, one of my team members is here in the audience today. He can vouch for that. That I think having being able to feel that you're psychologically safe in that team and you'll be recognized is more important than just the paycheck at the end of the month.
This is sharp Sunit and sharp Accenture advice for free, right? So it's all about engagement, and it's also validating for me. Just the other day, I tweeted that you cannot demand employee engagement; you've got to earn it, right? And it doesn't take infinite time, but do we have the intent? Does it become a way of our life? Which brings me actually to Nicolas, back to you. From your experience of being in the search business, the talent business, the fact that talent has a choice today, and talent is free agent. Whether big companies, small companies, talent is free agent. They will stay as long as they feel relevant, rewarded, acknowledged, whatever else. What would your perspective be, especially for mid-sized entrepreneurial organizations? How important is it for them to build their brand? Does that make a difference? Now, some companies may be more consumer facing, so they may have a more visible brand. But if it's not, Would you advise them to work on their employer brand building, and any 2 or 3 quick suggestions, recommendations that they could take away for building a stronger brand?
So I agree with you. If you, of course, have a consumer-facing business, it's much easier to build a brand. Nevertheless, I think the strongest brand for you will be your people internally. I've experienced myself when we start growing. I came into India, we were only 40 people. Today we're 130 people company. So I consider myself an entrepreneur as well. And what I saw is that what we did as an experiment at a certain point in time, because we also recruit from the bottom up in our company and we grow people, is we went to different campuses. Initially we went to 1-2 campuses, but we said, okay, let's go to 7-8 campuses. And with this, while we hire people from different campuses, we just realized that we were tapping in each of their networks. And we started making much easier to attract talent at a certain point in time. So today for us, if we were looking in a pool of like 2-3 B schools or MBA schools, we are now looking at 7-8. And what we realized is that if you have people who have a positive experience within your company, that network is invaluable. It's very valuable, sorry. So that's where I feel what you can work most of it. And if you can really find people that are inspired by what you're doing and they can transfer that to other people, that's the best way. And especially in a country like India, I've seen the referral network being one of the strongest globally, much more than from where I'm in Europe, and one of the strongest to also attract the best talent. And especially in the startup community, I've seen that most startups say the best talent we hired was actually through our network. Yeah. Although again, I talk against my business. One thing also I wanted to add on what I just heard, which was really pleasing to me, because I meet a lot of companies and they have their values and their vision, and most of them would be international companies. I actually rarely see mid-sized Indian companies having a clear view on what they want to stand for. And it is never part of a job brief when I sit with them and they explain what they're looking for. It's about what does the person need to do, where is he coming from, and what is the salary. Never it is about the values that the company has and how we should align ourselves. So often we need to really dig with the entrepreneurs when we sit with them to understand what will fit in your organization. And often I realize they don't really know. And I'm really pleased to hear that you actually have a really clear vision, because I think that's also the reason why you're quite successful today. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nicolas. I'm going to ask the same question to all three of you, and I want you guys to make some very rapid-fire responses. And then we'll go to the audience and start taking their questions. You know, when is a company small enough to look at creating functions, departments, to institutionalize systems, processes, brands, practices? And when does it become too big and too late for companies to have invested in building systems and processes? Now, since the agenda is more on organization building and HR and stuff, talent, when do you think is the right time for an entrepreneur to start seeking professional HR help, as different from just meeting statutory compliances, right? Because the world of HR has evolved so much, and the talent, as I said, is a free agent. So is there a time, a scale, the right time when entrepreneurs should start seeking good HR support and help? So maybe I'll go in this order. Maybe first with you, Nicolas, then with Lavanya, and finally the consultant's last word, and then we'll go to the audience. Yeah.
So I speak from my own experience again. I'm in the service industry, and my assets are my people. And I've realized I was doing most of the HR stuff, because we don't actually had an HR business partner till recently myself. So a lot of me and my work was going into sitting with people, which means I was actually not meeting clients enough or doing other stuff which I could do. And I've realized once you cross with, and I'm talking the core people you really want to work with, which probably going to be middle management for yourself. once you cross 50 to 70, 80 people, it becomes really difficult to get a real stronghold on and knowing everyone in the company. And having then that support of an HR business partner or HR director really helps to really nail down on what are the issues and what should be the initiatives. And having someone driving that for you makes a very, very big impact in the organization. So I would say 50, 60, 70 for me.
Yeah, I think the same number. I mean that it's it's more than just a number. I think it's that number. It's also the stage of the company. If you've had a stable, sustainable growth, you can kind of grow these systems yourself, build these systems in place. But if you're an organization that has had accelerated growth, then you just haven't had the time to really apprentice everyone, to really, push them through the system. These are times when you'll have to really revisit that number and say, is it 50, is it 40, or is it maybe something fundamentally different? Is it span of control? Once every manager hits maybe 10 managers, right? And then that grows, that's the point where not everyone is getting the kind of guidance and mentorship that they require. So it really varies, I think, but I guess, not a very nice answer, but the true answer is you'll know when you see it. When you're uncomfortable, you know that, look, this is the time when I probably
And you
need
shouldn't
some help.
delay it further because
Yes.
then, okay.
That problem's not going to go away.
Okay. Interesting. Sunit?
My perspective, and again, I was just thinking about this. I mean, I think it's never too early to start thinking about it. And maybe if there's a kind of a mantra I'll leave you with is that the time you cross, and it's not about your turnover, and maybe there's a number to it, but the time you are not able to remember the names of all your employees and know them personally is the time you need help, professional HR help. Either you need a full-time HR business partner or at least an advisor who's helping you with some of those elements. That would be my mantra.
Excellent. And my own comment really would be that HR today is really more your organization architect, your counselor, your advisor. And I think it's very important to have someone who'll keep you honest, because at the end of the day, you need someone to be your best friend and your sharpest critic, right? So I think the broad endorsement is that you know when you need it and don't delay it further. All right, so I think this has been some very powerful insights and very sharp ones. Could I possibly invite any questions from the audience here, from any of the panelists? Anything that you'd like to understand, a perspective or a comment on anything that's been said? So just please raise your hands and I'll try and come. The gentleman right there. Please go ahead, sir. Mention your name. And make it sharp so that we can try and cover in the 10 minutes as many questions. Please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Kaushik Majumdar. One quick question is, we talked about culture, company culture, right? How much, in your opinion, does it help in building leadership? And in your company, how do you look at it, that building leadership, what kind of cultural changes you brought in to ensure that leadership building?
So have you directed it at Lavanya? Would you like her to respond?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. And
Lavanya?
Yeah.
On culture and leadership and any examples?
Right. So I think talked about this a little bit already. Culture is just the outcome. A lot of people think culture is core values. Core values is the belief and the intent. The behaviors is what really is the culture, because the behaviors of everyone, is really what drives the culture of that organization. It's what drives the outcome. If you're in a consumer-facing business, you'll see it there. But either which way, whether it's a consumer-facing business or not, you'll see it in the results. So the intent and the motivations and the objectives and the goals of the leadership has to embody themselves as the behaviors of the rank and file. And the only way that can be done is if everybody from the top below really walks that talk, right? Then down to the last man, down to your most frontline employee, they are a mirror image of what that leadership is. So if you take personal ownership, if you don't have, so for example, in our headquarters, there used to be a time when there were separate restrooms for managers and for frontline, right? Salespeople or someone who works in the back office. We don't have that, right? And In fact, my HR who came to me and said, no, but I think it's better that the managers have a separate one, because sometimes these people come in from outside, they don't know how to use the restrooms. I said, well, then you teach them how to use the restrooms, right? If that's your problem, then you fix that problem. Go to the source of it and you fix it. But you don't create this bifurcation where you say, no, there's, there's us, there's mid-management and above, and we are different, and, there's frontline, and there's people who work in these back office and things, and they're different. So culture is more than what you say as core values. When it comes to actions, really, how are you embodying that? And I think that's the way, that's how you tie it all from leadership to culture to outcome.
Well said, Lavanya, well said. Someone at the back, I'll take the gentleman on this side at the end, right at the end. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Vipul Joshi. So the question, again, in HR is all about people connect, and we've talked about how the age-old organization as well as the current want to stay connected to the people. But there's a lot of talk about automation around HR. So, Michael, if you could want to put some of your thoughts, because you have an experience from Europe as well as you seen Indian culture. So how's the amalgamation of people connect with the automation today? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, of course, when I look at automation, I mainly look. So you want to have automation as a whole as a company, or just within the HR field?
Just within the HR.
Just within the HR field. I think Prabir would be the better person to answer this, but but I'm looking mainly at the recruitment part of things. If I look at the recruitment part of things, look, we're always in our business connecting people with people. So automation can help us to make things more efficient and to make sure that we focus more on the tasks which add value than to focus on things which don't add value. Yeah. I don't think automation is going to take over things anytime soon. Yeah, and I'm talking 10, 20 years. But I do think it will, in the next couple of years, make our jobs within recruitment, where I am, easier. That's my feeling.
So, I've written a lot about this subject. So you can always read my comments on social media or on Twitter or LinkedIn. But an Uber view is very simple. Anything which simplifies, anything which enhances experience, and anything which actually removes value erosion or adds to value multiplication in your entire employee life cycle is today within the purview of digitization of HR. Everything. And we don't have time to get into specifics, but my own experience has been it doesn't take the kind of time that people worry about, but it's really about, back to that issue about culture. It's about the culture that you want. Empowerment, trust. Why should someone else do someone else's job? It's your job. And the new era talent that we are getting, everyone seems to be comfortable with technology. It's become so intuitive. So very clearly, it is not only disruptive, it is, I think, possibly the one thing that you cannot do without. So that's my Uber comment. I'll take a question right at the back on this side, and maybe one question after that, so keep it sharp, and then we'll run out of time. Okay, I've noticed a hand. I'll come to you. Yes, sir.
Hello, I am Madhav. My question is to Lavanya. This is more of an experience question. So in your experience, how much time did you allow anyone to fit into culture, or in the management team especially? And when do you take a call that, no, this guy is not going to fit into culture, now system has to make him exit?
Okay. So the bulk of whom you see now in mid-management and senior management are people who have grown through the ranks. So we actually haven't experienced many cases like that, right? Because when you grow them through the ranks, they grow up within the system. They embody those values, and then they're ready to move up, up the chain. The only place where we've had to bring people laterally is in the fast growth businesses, or in when you completely diversify and go into a different, you completely diversify and then you seek a certain talent where you can't find that, it's not homegrown. In those cases, what we simply do is if you're clear on what you're looking for, then it's easy to look for that and it's easy to assess that. And it goes to Nicholas's point of, see, sometimes when I've seen JDs being written, because my HR will write the JD and she'll say, this is what needs to be done. And I said, yes, that's the task. It's what needs to be done, it's a task. But the role is much larger than the task. The role is, what kind of a person am I looking for in this role? What are the values that they need to embody? So there are certain competencies, but there are also certain intrinsic values that we look for. Are they entrepreneurial in their mindset? Will they take those calculated risks? Will they take up ownership for it? Or do they have a mindset of, no, I'm comfortable, I'm used to things sort of being laid out for me? And so, those are the things that I think really, as organizations, companies, business people, entrepreneurs, you've got to think about it and say, what do we stand for? What do we not stand for? And put those down and say, therefore, this is what I seek. Because you can't really look for everything. You can't take the best of everything. You've got to take a stance. And then when you put the JDs also at the time of assessment, think about what are the intrinsic values. Will this person fit in? Because I'm going to trust them and I'm going to give them autonomy and I'm not going to come in and hamstring them. Do I see markers in the interview that they will rise to that challenge? And I think if we follow that with very sharp focus, hiring mistakes, so to speak, will be few.
Well said. So we'll have the last question right in the middle. Yes, please. Sorry, I wish we had more time, but this is going to be the last question.
Hi, my name is Valay. So one of the dilemma for a business owner today is to build the second line of leaders. So my question it's open to the full panel. What is the importance of a succession plan for an organization? How should an organization go about it? And when is the right time for an organization to build a succession plan for their...
Okay, let's have the consultant's advice. So Sunit, all yours.
I think I won't get into the how to because we'll probably run out of time. But to be honest, again, I'm just going back to my first question, which I had asked all of you to show a raise of hands. I mean, again, as a leader, you're always working on, it's not building a succession pipeline, building the second line is not a point event. It's ongoing. So for instance, I also run a team within Accenture and I have a set of people who are directly reporting into me. Their development and building them to be able to do what I do today, maybe 6 months from now, 2 years from now, is ongoing. So to my advice would be that it's actually day to day. Now, to make it more practical, I think there are tools and systems and processes available. There's enough and more. You don't even need to hire me to do that. It's today with the democratization of knowledge, thanks to the internet, those tools and practices are available. But simple answer, or the Uber answer, to borrow a term from Prabir, is the fact that it's ongoing. There's never a right time. It's always important. And I think at least one tip, again, mantra that I give is that you need to be very clear and give feedback at the point of the event. So, giving feedback on a real-time basis instead of waiting for maybe 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, that's the most important thing. Because that's how people learn and grow. And again, there are ways in which you can make the feedback positive rather than necessarily becoming like a report card. That's as much practical advice I can give you in maybe 60 seconds.
Brilliant. So I couldn't have had a better set of panelists to help me plot this through. I think we've covered everything: aspiration, inspiration, talent, training, brand, succession, culture. So I think, thank you very much, Nicolas, Lavanya, Sunit, for helping us through our conversations. And thank you for your questions. My apologies for many hands that went up and we don't have the time for, but if you're able to get any of the panelists through the lunch hour, please do grab them and get your questions answered. So on behalf of all of us here, a big thank you to all of you and to the organizers for having us here. Thank you very much.